Executive Director of the National Council of Jewish Women and Treasurer of the International Alliance of Women. The International Alliance of Women co-sponsors this event together with the United Nations Association USA San Francisco chapter. Thank you to our sponsors and thank you to our wonderful speakers today. I will give them an opportunity to speak about themselves, but please make sure to look at the flyer of our event. Check out the information in their bios, and we are ready to start. Our event is focused on a very important aspect of the preconditions for successful empowerment of women and girls. We believe, and so is the international concept of women empowerment, that empowerment for girls and women depends on their freedom, guaranteed that they will be able to decide when to become mothers and how to plan the future of their family. And this is because poverty very often results from lack of education, lack of opportunities for job and vocational development. And very often this is a result from early pregnancies and lack of choice to plan when and how to start all different aspects of your life as mother, but also as successful professional and student. So with this, I will go to our first speaker. I'm pleased, delighted, and very honored to invite the president of the International Alliance of Women, Alison Brown, to deliver the opening remarks. Alison, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Antonia. The International Alliance of Women was founded 120 years ago for the rights of women. As we got our rights to vote, we then decided voting wasn't quite enough and we have to have more rights and also more responsibilities to control our destiny. The most important thing about a woman controlling her destiny is what she has searched for over millennia. And there have been many ways of preventing childbirth and preventing pregnancy. We know, for example, that Benjamin Franklin even wrote up a prescription for an abortifacient in Poor Richard's Almanac. Abortion has been very important to women, but not getting pregnant is even more important. But most of all, women want to control their own body. They want to have as many children as they want and no more, as many children as they can care for and no more. And indeed, they would like to have as many as they want and no fewer, which is why the recent hullabaloo in the United States about in vitro fertilization has raised a whole new aspect to women's control of their reproductive rights. I want to say something that you may not have known. Do you remember back in the Middle Ages, there was an enormous witch hunt? Well, analysis shows that that had to do with controlling women's bodies. They would persecute witches because witches were known to allow women to choose whether to carry a pregnancy to term or not. And as there'd just been a plague and the kings wanted sons in their realm, they had to get rid of all the witches who had medical knowledge so they might not help women decide for themselves. We are coming into a new kind of witch hunt around the world with forbidding abortion in Poland. It's going that way in Hungary, across the United States, where we thought we were home free. We have had rights taken away from us, and we need to guard this with all our might and main. And I look forward to hearing the speakers talk about this issue. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alison. And thank you again to the International Alliance of Women for supporting this important event. Now I'm pleased and honored to invite our next speaker, Bert DeVos, and she is Soroptimist International's representative to the United Nations in Geneva. Bert, you will be speaking about the international laws that lay the foundation of reproductive freedom and other associated rights. Please give us also some background about yourself and your organization.
Thank you very much, Antonio. And thank you very much, Alison. Thank you for having invited us. My name is Bert de Vos, and I'm the UN representative in Geneva for Soroptimist International. I am a lawyer of training, and I work very closely with the CEDAW Commission, as well with the special rapporteurs on human rights, as also in the ILO conventions. That's everything what touches the career and the lives of women in general. If I may, our organization, if you want to know something, yeah, we are more than 100 years old. We have representation in 122 countries, and we have for the moment 66,000 members. This our grassroots information is key, and we are then also a big partner at the UN and at the UN entities. If I may, I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to give you a presentation because the laws, of course, are always difficult to follow if I only speak and without the text. So, to start, I have to say that no single human right instrument focuses exclusively on reproductive rights. In contrast, the main UN and regional human rights instrument safeguard the different components of reproductive rights. Almost all nations in the world have adopted declarations and similar documents through consensus, and in practice, the UN and the regional human rights bodies confirm the diversity and the richness of reproductive rights. However, here are three messages that I would like to highlight. First, the global legislation which support women's reproduction rights exists since 70 plus years and forms a part of human rights. Especially, reproduction legislation includes the right to reproductive health, care services, goods and facilities that are available in adequate numbers, accessible physical and economically, accessible without discrimination and of good quality. Third, however, globally, there are still various levels of implementation of these rights. And I would like to take a little bit of time to go through these messages. Human rights, the basic values and international standards of human rights are written in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, and which has been signed by 192 countries. Human rights are universal, meaning all human beings born free and equal, and these rights are absolute, means that they cannot be voluntary in giving up, nor can they taken away. Consequently, when monitoring the work done by the state with respect to reproductive rights, and when providing advice to governments and parliaments, it is crucial to ensure that nobody is left alone. Reproductive rights are a subset of sexual and reproductive health and rights, which are human rights since the International Conference on Human Rights in 1986, a non-binding proclamation of Tehran was the first international document to recognize one of these rights when it stated that parents have the basic human rights to determine freely and responsibly the number and the spacing of their children. States have been slow in incorporating these rights, as we all know. Some of these rights have already been recognized by legally binding international human rights instruments, such as treaties. And there are others have been mentioned only in non-binding recommendations. And of course, there are others who are not at all accepted and by the international community and therefore remain at the level of the advocacies of the different groups. WHO is of course a very important issue in this. The constitution of WHO was adopted by the International Health Conference in 1948 already, and today it counts 194 member states. Reproductive rights rest on the recognition of the basic right of all couples and individuals to decide freely and respectfully the number, the spacing, and the timing of their children, and to have the information and the means to do so. Furthermore, the right to achieve the highest standards of sexual and reproductive health. This also includes the right of all to make decisions concerning reproduction free of discrimination, intimidation, and violence. The WHO states that sexual and reproductive health involve 5 key components: ensuring contraceptive choice, improving maternal and newborn health, reducing sexual transmitted infections, eliminating unsafe abortion, and promoting healthy sexuality, included for the youth. Clearly, the reproductive health are directly connected to the right of health, but also they are linked to other rights we already have. We have the right to education, the right to participation, the right to privacy, the right to learn, to mention some. All of these rights are included in a range of international human rights treaties and agreements, including UN conventions. This means governments must uphold all people's sexual reproductive health. The reproductive health and family planning are mentioned in a number of international conventions and treaties and agreements. To mention some, the Convention on Civil and Political Rights, the Convention on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, the Convention on Elimination of all forms of discrimination against women, the Convention for the Right of the Child, and so on. Some of these international treaties and conventions, such as the CRC and the CEDAW, are legally binding treaties. And they make them very powerful and powerful advocacy tool to hold leaders accountable. Governments often fall short for fulfilling their commitments outlined in these international treaties and agreements. However, by signing this agreement, they are legally bound to uphold these commitments. For every UN treaty, there is a committee of human rights experts that monitors its implementation. These committees regularly assess countries' progress in implementing a particular convention or treaty. If countries fail to follow through with their commitments, the monitoring group can make recommendations, write statements, and hold governments accountable. Other international agreements, such as the ICPD, the Program of Action, and the Beijing Platform of Action, are influential policy documents. Even though they are not legally binding, governments that sign these agreements can still be held accountable for their commitment. These agreements also set international standards that can be used to place pressure on leaders to respect human rights, including the reproduction rights. I have made now, and I'm going very quickly through this, all articles who are linked to reproduction health rights and family planning. And if you like later to go through them and analyze them, feel free to use the presentation. Dus as you see, there are a lot of conventions, and I really did it the international agreement, but also the regional one. Of course, there are some who are very important for us. And of course, the CEDAW Convention is a core human right, legally binding treaty to address discrimination against women, and is sometimes also referred to as the International Bill on Women's Rights. Member states undertake to pursue a policy of eliminating discrimination in all its forms and to guarantee women to exercise and enjoyment of their human rights and fundamental freedoms on the basis of equality with men. It covers all areas of women's life, in both in public and private sphere, including discrimination in the relation to the right of health and health services. In Article 12 and 16 of the Convention, the member states have signed and have the obligation to ensure access to health care services, including related to family planning. Furthermore, there are many other provisions of the Convention which are indirect bearing the woman's rights in relation to health, and some of which are being explicated in the general recommendations of CEDAW, such as the FGM, sexual violence, but also reproduction, and another one is AIDS and IVF. What are the practical implications of this treaty? The Convention imposes a duty on the international law to respect, protect, and fulfill the human rights articulated hereunder. Of course, in a perfect world, the aspiration of legal law would be observed, but in reality, they are not observed. The UNFPA started in 1996 as a UN Nation Sexual and Reproductive Health Agency. It is in the same year that the United Nations General Assembly declared that parents have the exclusive rights to determine freely and responsible the number and the spacing of children. The UNFPA promotes gender equality, empowerment of women, and let girls and young people take control over their body and their future. Its goal is ensuring sexual and reproductive rights and the choices for all, especially young women and women, so that they can access a high-quality sexual and reproductive health services, including the voluntary family planning, material health care, and the sexual education. The work of the UNFPA is guided by the ECPD Program for Action of '94. And the commitment in 2019 in Nairobi to the program with the context of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. A little explanation about the ECPD. It is the International Conference on the Population and Development that recognizes the women's rights to reproductive and sexual health as being a key element to women's health. During the International Convention of 1994, 179 governments have transformed the global thinking on population and development issues and defined a revolutionary agenda placing people's dignity and the rights at the heart of the SDGs. At the conference, the governments affirmed that inclusive, sustainable development is not possible without prioritizing human rights, including reproductive rights, empowering women and girls, and addressing inequalities as well as the needs and aspirations and the right of individual women and men. The ICPD sets the standard for people-centered development, guided national policies and programs for the implementation of the program of action by governments in collaboration with parliaments and civil society, including women and youth-led organizations, the private sector, community groups, and individuals at the grassroots level. The right to reproductive and sexual health includes the right to life, liberty, and the security of the person, the right to health care and information, the right to non-discrimination in the allocation of the resources of health services and their availability and accessibility. Of central importance are the right to the autonomy and the privacy in making sexual and reproduction decisions, as well in the right to informed consent and confidentiality in the relations to health services. This is a new attention to human rights, and the program of action is a consensus document, and the end product is a negotiation and a compromise involving the 179 states, which stated that the Beijing Declaration, the explicit recognition and reaffirmation of the right of the woman to control all aspects of their health, in particular their own fertility, is the basis of their empowerment. Today, 30 years later, progress is threatened by multifaceted crises, backsliding on the rights and the choices of women and girls, the impact of COVID-19, and the polarization of the sexual and reproductive health and the rights agenda. And while there is progressive activism for social justice, climate action, and equality, we are at a critical inflection point to reserve the hard-won gain and deliver on the vision of the ICD-PD agenda and the SDGs. We need to point out that the fulfillment of the reproductive rights save lives, empower women, and bring economic benefits. Advocating for and upholding international rules and regulation is essential in the safeguarding of women's reproductive rights. Reproductive freedom and family planning plays a pivotal role in breaking the cycle of women's poverty and fostering their empowerment. Women's reproductive and family planning rights are fundamental components of gender equality and human rights. Reproductive freedom and family planning is not only allowing women to control their reproductive choices, but also pave the way for successful education and career pursuit, providing a crucial platform for economic success. International efforts to protect women's reproductive rights and family planning are instrumental in fostering empowerment and eradicating women's poverty. The ability to make autonomous choices about when and how to have children or not only enchantles women education and career opportunities, but also contributes to breaking the circle of poverty. Through the combination of global international advocacy initiatives and the direct service provision, the international community can continue to advance the cause of reproductive freedoms, ensuring that women everywhere have the tools they need to control the reproductive destinies and achieve the successes of all facets of their life. By championing these efforts, societies can work towards eliminating women's poverty and fostering their empowerment for success and the ability to escape poverty. And may I end by pointing out that the existing international legislations need to be implemented by the member states, and civil society needs to demand the correct implementation at national and local level. Thank you for your time, and thank you for all your excellent work.
Thank you so much, Bert. Thank you for laying so comprehensively and clearly the international framework, the international law framework and policies that regulate the field discussed today. And now I'm if anybody has questions to Bert, please wait until the end of our presentations, and you will have an opportunity to get your answers from her. Now I'm pleased to pass the floor to Ashley Ravice. She is the president of the United Nations Association of the USA San Francisco chapter. And she's also a board member of the League of Women Voters of California. She will be speaking about policies. The United States, as many of you know, has many challenges to address when we speak about women's rights and equality. And Ashley has been a leader and an exceptional advocate, organizer in the field. She will give us concrete actions that we have been taken to improve the situation of women in the aspects discussed today. Ashley, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Antonia, and my fellow colleagues. It's my honor to share this stage with you today to be discussing such an important topic. Thank you for putting this economic webinar where we're addressing how reproductive freedoms actually achieve economic freedom for women. I'm joining you virtually from the unceded lands of the Lenape, the federally recognized Delaware tribe, honoring ancestral lands of the Lenape tribes of present-day New York City here at CSW and their descendants. We honor with gratitude the land itself, all of the ancestors past, present, and emerging. Like Antonia mentioned, my name is Ashley Ravice, and I am the president of the United Nations Association of San Francisco and the convener of the Ratify movement. It's a national campaign for the US Senate to ratify CEDAW and the rights of the child. I'm also the director for the League of Women Voters of California, where I've served as Deputy Area Director of Social Policy, helping to co-sponsor legislative reforms in California. And what I can say and share with you today is that I have seen a change in the political landscape that mirrors the national backlash on women's rights, as it models the anti-rights values through the behaviors of sweeping cuts to programs and services for women and girls. So even when our elected officials and or our state leadership and or even our national leadership declares support for women's rights, what we are seeing is drastic cuts to programs that address these very concerns. We've seen the impacts of the federal deficit trickle down to California in devastating ways. And forgive me for being very California-centric in my views. I will try to broaden it as much as I can, but it's just what is on the tip of my tongue. So in the federal deficit, there is $700 million in cuts to the Victims of Crime Act, or VOCA. And that addresses survivors of domestic violence, people facing sexual violence, and access to culturally appropriate services. This is all going to end. Losses of these federal funds is creating a $200 million shortfall in programming and services in California alone, which represents, when you take the dollars and put it towards people, that represents shuttering over 350,000 emergency shelters for survivors of domestic violence, shuttering rape crisis centers for more than 46,460 survivors of sexual violence waiting for the rape kits to be collected, not even tested, ending cultural competency for more than 42,000 underserved individuals, which also includes an additional 4,300 children. Just this last legislative cycle, I worked with the budget chair in California to review, an unpublished 10-year audit of the California budget. And it highlighted that in the last 10 years, the state has spent an average of $1 billion on programming for women and children, which is not a lot when you have approximately a $3 trillion annual budget. That's a drop in the bucket. However, when the data is reviewed from an equity lens under the CEDAW framework, which was my ask to the budget chair, it unveiled that the budget and programs were entirely for children or women solely in caregiving functions. So the fact of the matter is that there has been little to no funding for women to secure safety, employment, education, or housing in the last 10 years. So how does federal and state spending cuts all fit into the framework of CEDAW? Well, in times of fiscal uncertainty, we all know that programs for women and girls and children are the absolute first to be cut, and that funding is redirected elsewhere. CEDAW will provide the framework to ensure this practice is discontinued because it provides the data to highlight these discrepancies and these disparities. It gives us tools to address what's happening between making promises of passing legislation and then immediately undercutting the funding for those programs that you are still campaigning on often, you see. So let's relate CEDAW to reproductive rights more in a tangible way. The last speaker, Bertha, you did a great job of showing the international connection and the international law. I will remind our audience that in the United States, we have yet to ratify CEDAW. So we don't have a seat at the table, and we don't have those international protections under the CEDAW framework currently. But how does it relate to reproductive rights? Well, to put it plainly, the United States is the only advanced economy without government mandated paid maternity leave, without mandatory health care, with a severe lack of affordable child and elder care options, further increasing the burden on women that work to also caretake. The lack of early access to well baby care in the United States results in the highest maternal mortality rate in the world. Women face a greater difficulty in securing affordable housing and are more likely to experience homelessness because of the systemic gender inequities in the US. Moreover, in the United States, having children is the single greatest predictor that you will be evicted. So let's look at women's reproductive health even more broadly than that, noting the uncontested truth that a woman's control of her reproductive health is fundamental to her mobility and every other aspect of life, including access to employment, fair wages, housing, as you saw, education, and civic participation. So I want us to take a moment and to kind of change the narrative on reproductive health that we are seeing in the national dialogue, which is incredibly fixed solely on abortion. And as advocates, I completely understand we are dialed into this reactive response. But I need us to pause and I need us to shift the narrative into a broader understanding that abortion is just one part of women's health care. And it's just one part that's currently under attack. Access to oral contraceptives is also under attack. And more often than not, oral contraceptives are used to delay and to preserve the ability for a woman to become pregnant, because there are multiple conditions or diseases that are unique to women. And when they go untreated, the result is infertility or often even death. So it's critical that we call out the disparate treatment that we are seeing unfold in these national dialogues, where women are fighting for access to approved medications. So as I mentioned, there are more than 16 unique health conditions and diseases specific to women. We got to talk about the female reproductive system as a whole body system. And oral contraceptives are specifically FDA approved to treat these conditions. That includes everything from fibroids, endometriosis, ovarian insufficiency, Rett syndrome, Turner syndrome, and this doesn't even include the list of postpartum conditions such as kidney disease, thyroid disease, eclampsia, insulin resistance, gallbladder disease, dropped bladder, hemorrhaging, and there's more. The human body and what we know about the women's reproductive system is so limited. It was only in, I want to say 2020, that MIT did the first international study of what happens to a woman's body while she's pregnant and after in the postpartum research. We know how babies are made. We know every function. We know every phase. We have documented this for over 50 years, but at no time until the last, 4 years did we ever pay any money to research what happens to the woman when she is carrying a child. Life, as we know, is precious, and whether you choose to have a child or not always should be your decision to make, because your life could be at risk. And because we understand so little about the woman's female reproductive systems and how that system controls and impacts so much more in our body, there's a lot to question when we see sweeping legislation attacking access to healthcare. When we look at the attack on abortion medications, we need to further recognize that the United States system of giving birth is dependent on access to these medications. The rate of induction of labor in the United States has risen steadily from 9.6% of induced labors and deliveries in 1990 to over 45% of all labor and delivery being induced with abortive medications. The NIH, or the National Institute of Health, has reported that of those, more than 10% of those inductions have no medical reason to support the intervention, which begs the conclusion that inducing a pregnancy with abortive drugs is part of the standard care in the US. This is the standard practice of giving birth. So where does the rollback end? Access to medicines that treat conditions from cancer to autoimmune diseases to ulcers can also end pregnancy, and these are in question. As a result, we have doctors and pharmacists in more than a dozen states with strict abortion restrictions who are trying to navigate this very question. They don't understand if they can prescribe their female patients access to these medications that treat these conditions on the off chance that they will become criminally liable or that they are losing their license for prescribing FDA certified medications. Even more extreme, we're seeing women being criminally prosecuted for natural miscarriages. CEDAW is the framework to address many of these issues that are unique to a woman's reproductive experience. Abortion is just one aspect of a woman's health care, and it should remain as a private option to be discussed between the woman and her provider, not a woman and her government. So with my remaining time, I would like to share a little bit of a personal story that I have about my access issues that I've lived and faced over my reproductive cycles of aging in the United States. When I was in my early 20s, after university and between a job, I was uninsurable. I was aged out of being insured under my parents' insurance system, and I was not able to access any insurance because I have asthma, an autoimmune condition, which was a pre-existing condition that did not allow me to register for any open insurance markets. When I had to go to Planned Parenthood for reproductive health care, it wasn't for an abortion. It was for standard annual checkups. We have cervical cancer and we have the BRCA gene in my family. And these are important medical conditions unique to a woman that she needs to get reviewed. And I was petrified crossing that line because people were pulling on me and shouting at me and yelling at me. How dare you, shaming me, slut shaming me, putting the Bible in my face, spitting on the floor, just because I was going for my annual pap smear. Fast forward to my reproduction and giving birth to my first daughter. She was breached, and it was a very traumatic experience, one where I was hemorrhaging, I was passed out on the table. The doctors were trying to revive me with a temperature of 106 so that I could make my informed decision. And I remember coming to telling them, let my husband decide. I don't know where I am. Just make it stop after over 24 hours of labor that was induced. As a breach, it was extremely intense. And honestly, I was dying on the table, and my child was dying too. The doctors required medical intervention, but what they also required was my consent. And it really begs the question of when we're quietly discussing in the halls of Congress or civil discourse in the chambers of our state legislature, where this emergent situation is not being respected for what it deserves, the consent of the woman as first and primary. So with that, I will thank you, and I'm here for additional questions, and I'm leaving it to my colleagues here to share their stories.
Thank you so much, Ashley. Such a great overview of very sad reality about women, especially women mothers in the United States. And also, thank you so much for sharing with us your personal story. I know we often share mothers' experiences here and how you can raise a child in this situation. And it makes you even greater resource for all of us because you have also the personal experience and the understanding. Speaking of policy, I'm now pleased to pass the floor to our next speaker, Chanel Smith, Executive Director of the Women and Girls Initiative, Los Angeles. And she will speak how policy works, but also how enforcement works. And she will speak about specific programs in the field based on policies that we are able to institute. Chanel, the floor is yours.
Thank you all so much. I'm so very honored to be here. My name is Chanel Smith. I'm the Executive Director for the Women and Girls Initiative with Los Angeles County. And I just want to say a big thank you to Ashley for sharing your personal story. I think that really helps kind of take the global, the national into what it is that we're talking about today, which really is how these policies affect a woman, right? And her family, her children, and her livelihood. And so I just want to say thank you so much for trusting us with your story. I am from Los Angeles County, and I'm here to talk a little bit about the role that local government can play in women's economic freedom, but also in our reproductive planning. In Los Angeles County, when we knew that Roe was falling, it was very important for us. At that time, we had the first ever all-female board of supervisors. It was very, very important for them that Los Angeles County be a safe haven and that it be a place where women who were from LA, who live in LA, but also women from all over the country had a place to go. And so I understand that we are in California, which is kind of our own ecosystem, and things are done a bit differently there than they are other places. And so I appreciate Ashley for also laying out kind of the groundwork of how the federal budget is affecting our kind of state budget and what that looks like in practice. And so what I want to give is just some examples of how, even in this very dire kind of federal funding situation, local governments really can support not only their own constituents, but people from all across the country. In 2022, our California Senate passed Bill SB 1245, which allocated $20 million to establish Los Angeles County as an abortion safe haven. And so that pilot program is being run by a nonprofit. That was very intentional on our part, because it was very clear to us that funding needed to be allocated very quickly to the people who needed that funding. We are very clear that in Los Angeles, that the role of government, while we might have the best intentions, bureaucracy can often very much slow down our ability to get funding out of the door. And it was very important to our board that we do not get in the way of providing this access to the women who really need it. So we partnered with several different CBOs and to create essentially a no wrong door approach. That $20 million was given to an agency called Essential Access Health. They have done a phenomenal job of being able to get that funding out the door in particular buckets. And just to give you kind of some statistics on what it is that it looks like in LA since this project has started, agencies have reported a 10% increase in clients that are served overall. Of those, some of them have seen up to 178% increase in clients that are coming from out of state, and a 27% increase in clients that are coming from in-state. And these funding does not only cover, actually this funding doesn't actually cover abortion care as far as the abortion itself, right? This is all of the things that are necessary in order for somebody to be able to actually receive that reproductive care. So training, education, clinical support, transportation, hotel, childcare, kind of all of the different things that are necessary in order for somebody to actually be able to receive reproductive care in a place that is not their home, right? By our federal government saying that this was up to states, one of the things that I think that we don't spend enough time talking about is the economic cost for somebody to be able to receive that care someplace that is not close to their home, right? While Los Angeles County is a safe haven and people can come there, and we have legal support, we've got pro bono attorneys that will work to support a woman if she is held criminally or civilly liable when she gets back to her home state. But there's a lot of costs that are involved in that, right? You need transportation costs. People have to take off of work. They need a place to stay. They are going to need care, continued care, after receiving any kind of procedure. They also sometimes need childcare. And all of that while they're going through something that is incredibly personal and incredibly scary. And they oftentimes can't tell the people in their lives what are happening, because we have this legal framework now that allows for women to be held criminally, but also civilly liable. And so what does that look like for them and their families? So we in Los Angeles recognize that there are costs that are associated that are far greater than just the procedure around an abortion. We also recognize that education is huge. And so our county government received a grant for $200,000 to be able to train all of our county employees that might encounter people who are seeking just information about abortion care or information about reproductive care. So people who work for our social services departments, and we have a 211 hotline where people call to get resources. There are people who work with our in-custody foster youth, or people who are working with our probation department, women who are incarcerated. And so making sure that they have the correct information and that they are actually able to give women who are seeking information things that are based in science, and things that are actually based in facts as far as what resources are available, but also being able to do that in a way that is trauma informed and that is not encouraging shame, right? Regardless of what it is that you might personally believe. This is an incredibly personal topic, right? And I know that kind of our jobs as policymakers are to think about this in terms of legislation, right? Like that's our job. That's what we have to do. And anytime that you have sweeping legislation about a topic that is as personal as your medical decisions over your body, right? We need to be incredibly sensitive to that. And so I would encourage other local governments who want to be able to support the women that are living in their districts, but also maybe women who are coming from out of town, right? Who are recognizing that it isn't safe or legal for people to receive these services everywhere. I would encourage them to really think about the role that government plays and the role that government does not play. And so how is it that we partner with our local entities? How do we partner with our local community-based organizations? How do we partner with our local medical facilities so that the decisions that we're making are really informed by the people who they are there to support? Community-based organizations are where women go and have historically always gone, right? When they are trying to seek some sort of care, right? People are not knocking on the doors of our city hall when they are looking for abortions. They're not calling their elected officials to talk through their medical care, right? And so we have to be very cognizant of that and aware of the fact that we need to have the correct people at the table, and we need to get the funding in the hands of people who are able to actually do this work in a way that is holistic, in a way that honors women and a way that honors their consent. Like Ashley said, there are some dire situations that are happening, and a woman's consent at all times needs to be on the forefront. And that's not just in the medical room, right? That is when we are thinking about allocating funding and what does that funding look like and where does that funding go? And so I just, again, want to really thank you, Antonia, for being able to put this together, and for giving us all the perspective from the global level to the national level, and then on a local level, what role do each of us play in this? Thank you all so much for having me here.
Thank you, Chanel. We're all inspired by your program's work, by the work your team has been putting together, and also combining the policy level work with programming. It's a great help and great example for other counties and places in California. I'm also very grateful that the National Council of Jewish Women, which I, in this case, represent, put together this program. I'm honored to acknowledge our president, Dina Gardi, and our vice president and past president, many times past president, Linda Kurtz, being here, as well as all the other members of the organization. Thank you for supporting this program. And then I'm honored to introduce now Rebecca Cormack, our Women's Policy Director, and she will speak about our program, which she manages and leads on reproductive freedom. Rebecca, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Antonia, and thanks everyone for being here. And thank you to the speakers that came before me. You're all very inspiring, and thank you for your work. It's awesome. So, like Antonia mentioned, I'm Rebecca. I'm the Director of Women's Policy at the National Council of Jewish Women in San Francisco. And before I talk more about our programming and what we're doing to like locally on the ground to support women who might be going through abortions or other reproductive healthcare challenges, I just want to kind of echo Ashley's points on economic disadvantages that are brought upon women and children in the US in general, and just start by saying that the criminalization of reproductive health care really can lead to increased stigma in accessing reproductive healthcare services. It can delay life-saving necessary care, as we heard previously. It can lead to added travel and overall heightened cost, which Chanel also mentioned, because people will have to pay for their lodging, pay for a flight potentially, drive a car, find a car, pay for the gas, take time off work, and they might not even have paid sick days. Figure out where they're going to leave their child or children if they already have kids, and they might not have health insurance that would cover some or any of the cost. So in addition to that, there are providers that might feel hesitant to provide these abortions, or even just reproductive health care procedures, even in horrible cases such as rape. And then beyond this, the criminal prosecution of women who may seek an abortion is difficult because these women might not have the resources to challenge their prosecution, and as a result are vilified for seeking the care that they need. And so just wanted to kind of contextualize that this, these cases, because it really, in the context of like economic disadvantages, the poverty cycle, it really minimizes the dignity and the independence of women. And so this is kind of the perspective that, or part of the perspective that NCJW was coming from in our efforts to create programming that would basically support or provide some sense of support to women who are seeking abortions in the US, and in our case, in the Bay Area specifically. So about a year ago at NCJW San Francisco, we were trying to brainstorm. We were aware of the fact that people are making a lot of sacrifices to seek reproductive health care. And a lot of people are coming from other states into the Bay Area to do so. And so we decided to host these care package making events where our volunteers gather, create care packages, and then we deliver these care packages to patients in the Bay Area. And so these care packages are made up of all donated items, and these items are maxi pads, different teas, chocolates, candies, things that make people feel comforted, instant hot packs, and then we put notes in each of the care packages that just express our support for these people who have made so many sacrifices for the sake of their own health and well-being. And yeah, so just in general, the act of just providing a couple of pads inside these care packages can really make a difference in someone's life. People who are maybe not even aware that they would need to have pads after their procedure, or maybe they're not, they don't have the financial security to get pads, things like that, that can just really, make a person's day after they make so many sacrifices for themselves. So if anyone wants to get involved or wants to learn more about how we do this, kind of like get more into the nitty-gritty details, you can email me and I'll put my contact information in the chat. And so yeah, that's a bit about the care package program. And then in addition, the National Council of Jewish Women San Francisco is also working to educate. We are a grassroots advocacy and education organization. So we have hosted several panel events in the past pertaining to the topic of sexual and reproductive health and rights in general. So for instance, last summer, we had a panel of experts from different US states to just explain the legal situation in their respective states, and kind of compare and contrast what women in each state have access to or don't have access to. And so we host these sessions pretty regularly. If you are interested in attending or you would like to get connected with us to speak even, again, I will put my contact information in the chat. So yeah, thank you very much. If you have any questions, throw them in the chat as well.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. I still remember the nice note that your team received from one of the women getting abortion. And maybe we can refer people to these feelings that many of the women get and girls getting abortion have of loneliness and being stigmatized, and especially those that travel to California from states where abortion is no longer available and accessible. And maybe this is the best outcome from this program, making people to making women to feel supported at this important moment and very hard for many of them. And then I wanted to add what we do on policy level. We lobby locally in California at our Californian capital every year, having our lobby day, and we of course include legislation that is associated with abortion rights and reproductive rights. And the National Council of Jewish Women is a national network and international network of independently incorporated organizations. So we are able to put together national actions, and we lobby every 3 years at the US Capitol on important issues for women and children, and not only. So now I hope I gave some time to all of you attending this event to put your questions in the chat. And we can start with the first question that I see. What risks and liability do women face when going to LA, coming for an abortion when it's banned in their state? And Chanel?
That is a very great question. And the answer to that is that we don't actually know. So, which I know is not a great answer. But we, in addition to kind of a part of our Safe Haven project is that we work with a local law school that has several different attorneys that have volunteered their time to work on this issue. And what we understand is that with the entire country, when it comes to liability, like criminal, but also civil liability, we don't have precedent yet, right? And so what we essentially are waiting for are for these cases to be filed, and then for us to see how they play out, and for us to be able to see how it is that they stand up on appeal, right? That is not something that luckily we have had to do quite yet. I know that kind of throughout the country, there are different cases that are being filed, and different attorneys are coming from all over the United States to be able to support those women. I can say that thus far, we have not had any women that have come to get these procedures in Los Angeles that we have had to deploy legal resources to support. That does not mean that won't happen, right? And on the front end, we also do a lot of things for confidentiality, ensuring that, like as a funder, right, we have no idea what state these women are coming from. We do know that they are coming from out of state, but we don't track where. We don't have any demographic information on them that would be able to identify them. We are very clear with kind of our media. Our elected officials don't visit any of these sites. Our medias don't come to any of these sites because we want to ensure that no one is inadvertently harmed while they are trying to seek medical care. So I know it's not a great answer, but the answer is that essentially we don't know yet. We are waiting for cases to be filed, of course, hoping that they are not, but like the rest of the country, we're just kind of trying to figure out what do these new laws, what do they look like in practice and in enforcement, and kind of what how will they stand up on appeal, and how will they, you know, be able to, what precedent will be set from them.
And let's see if we have other questions. Feel free also to raise your hand if you have a question, and we'll invite you to speak. And you can see all of our speakers on the screen. Well, Ashley, I wanted to ask a little bit about the Ratify movement. The National Council of Jewish Women is co-founder of the Ratify movement. Just maybe very briefly, what is the goal of the movement, and what kind of organizations it consists of?
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you for this platform to share more about the Ratified movement. So this has been a program of United Nations Association of San Francisco. And what we have done is to provide a platform to convene the collaboration and the partnerships. And we've been meeting now routinely for probably the last 3 years. And as you mentioned, National Council of Jewish Women, you're one of the founding organizations that leaned into this work of we need to do something. And what that looked like was we need to first get together and create the next steps. And so for the first 2 years, we were just remobilizing groups. The treaty is 40 years in the making. There's been multiple attempts to get congressional approval. The last attempt was in 2010. Prior to that was 2002. It's actually passed all committee hearings successfully. It's just never been agendized on the Senate floor. And so the purpose of the Ratified movement is to start raising awareness, because when we would reach out to communities of, have you heard of CEDAW? What's your position on it? They'd say, CEDAW, what's that? And so we knew immediately we had a lot more work on the ground level to do. We could always tap the organizations that were well versed in it, like Zonta or Amnesty or ACLU or League of Women Voters. These are some of the core organizations. And we've been broadening that. We've been looking at beyond just the voting rights for the civic participation groups. We're looking at healthcare, and we have domestic workers signed on. We have youth organizations signing on. We're looking at the teachers' unions, because CEDAW impacts every aspect of a woman's life. And that framework of equality is really the roadmap of equity, the steps that we can take to achieve the equality. So we've managed in the last legislative cycle, we had 2 congressional actions. One was a resolution and seeking the Senate to reintroduce it into the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And one was a House letter to President Biden asking him to reintroduce the convention. So we're pretty close to having some more visibility in Congress. We're just waiting for the election cycle to finish in order to figure out who is going to be retaining their seats, because all the committees shift every year. And we had a lot of shakeup in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee in this last year. And so that is the committee that would need to readdress and move it to the Senate floor. But as a reminder, CEDAW itself is a bipartisan supported international treaty of a women's Bill of Rights. It was created in the Nixon administration. It's been presented by 2 Republican presidents seeking its ratification and 3 Democratic presidents seeking its ratification. So there is support. It just needs to go to the Senate floor to have that dialogue.
Thank you so much. It's been very inspiring and very beneficial to work in this network of organizations focusing on these two important conventions, and hopefully we'll gather a larger pool of representatives and senators that will support our efforts. It's an embarrassment that a country that led literally the movement to see this creation still doesn't ratify it.
Yes, that's something that you did raise. The delegates under the Nixon administration had a very large role in drafting the treaty. So that's the part that we kind of chuckle at when there's still pushback. But over the 40 years, it's grown a life of its own. And there's a lot of misinformation, a lot of propaganda of what CDOT is and what it does and doesn't do. And so part of the campaign is to address that. We're mobilizing. We've been partnering with Cities for CDOT to move local ordinances in multiple states. And we have a groundswelling now of grassroots organizations that have supported. 80 million Americans, as I mentioned, are thriving under a CDOT framework at a local level. And there's definitely more work to be done. And I don't want to leave out the second part of the Ratify movement, which is also to work towards ratifying the rights of the child. And what we've been doing at the state level right now is trying to work towards ending child marriage in the United States without exceptions. Because as many of you know, there is no federally mandated age to become legally married. There are exceptions. Every state has a different age, and there are always exceptions. We're trying to remove those exceptions because we're seeing children as young as 10 being legally married under these exceptions. And it's really just a mask for human trafficking, of child exploitation. The children are married against their will, and it's a forced marriage situation, and they have no legal right or authority to divorce until they become 18. And so the stories of survivors of child marriage are compelling. Unfortunately, people like to put a very romantic view, and that's what we're battling is, what about Romeo and Juliet? And I think the larger question that we have, and this is what feeds back into this conversation, is why in this country are we required to become married just because you're pregnant? And that's the bigger question you need to ask. If there's not a social safety net to secure women's access to healthy well-being and child reproduction, that's the bigger question. No one should be forced into marriage just to survive a pregnancy.
And stigma.
And the stigma. That's
well, we have more questions in the chat. One of them is from Diana Ogonyo, and it's more about the prospect and future work. What practical steps do the speakers think need to be taken at local, national, and international levels to reach these goals? And what can we all do to support in that? And I will start with Bert, if I'm not putting you on the spot, maybe to address some of the global aspects, and then we'll speak with the rest of our speakers.
Thank you very much. No, I would think that be aware of what exists. Please read and see what all the actions can be taken, and all can be based on legislation that exists already. I think is you have to mobilize civil society, certainly if you're speaking in the US, where none of the agreements have been signed by the US. There is no control possibility. No experts will ever see if there is an implementation of an agreement because it's not signed. Thus you have a civil society, I think you need to go and see which laws international do exist and which perhaps one of the states have signed and then use this to implement the laws in the local and national level. That's one thing I say. Also, what I say always is, please educate your civil society members. Let them know what is possible and what are your rights. Let them know that these reproductive rights are human rights. We don't speak about the abortion. It's much more than this. This is not only your child marriage. This goes also about periodic healthcare or menopausal healthcare. It's all around it. It is the future of the woman who cannot decide for herself to be educating or have a career or ending the poverty if she doesn't know that it is her right also to say no or yes and plan the family planning. So I say, know what exists, educate civil society, and go up to your local communities and speak to the people who are responsible for this. Thank you.
And thank you, Bert. And education is key. We realize by just experience, because the lack of movement and really serious and enthusiastic movement toward the ratification of this international instruments results from women believe that they actually have top level rights in the field. Not knowing what women in other countries are able to enjoy as rights, thanks to the ratification of the two conventions. So we really focus, and part of the goal of the Ratify movement is to bring this knowledge to women, to have more programs that present the achievements of women in other countries, especially the developed countries, in whose company we should be, as opposed to being in the company of countries that are behind, far behind. Who else wants to address this question? More nationally? And maybe just to say one particular measure or action that you think is critical going forward and given where we are. Rebecca?
I just have like one quick thing to say about that. I think that education, of course, is like crucial, but also educating yourself about who's running for office and voting for the people that are going to protect your reproductive rights is really important. And yeah, we're in the US about to go through all that soon. So please
Of
vote.
Great point, Rebecca. Thank you for bringing that. Well, we have more questions in the chat. Stephanie is asking, is there anything you would advise that people do in countries where women's reproductive rights are under threat to help prevent a reversal of women's rights? And maybe now, when we have the experience, some of our American speakers can give some idea.
I would like to share something that I've learned from attending CSW, promoting this conference as a way to educate myself on some of these issues. What I've learned was that the Global South is actually doing a lot better job than the United States is in protecting reproductive health and access to health, and decriminalizing things that on the history books they've criminalized, miscarriages or, abortion. They are reversing in a positive, progressive direction, which I think we should be modeling. And on the flip side, what I've learned here is that there's a very coordinated and well-funded effort of an anti-rights campaign that is being funded predominantly by US dark money going into locations outside of the global South. For instance, there's a very targeted approach in most of the African nations to both criminalize reproductive care or criminalize gender or criminalize things that we are seeing. So we're seeing that American rhetoric that is just on the social media channels that we probably all in this space look away from. But what we're not realizing is how that rhetoric is being well-funding campaigns in other countries to strip these rights away. So I want all of us to no longer be complacent in watching our rights as women around the globe. It's not just, oh, that's not my country, that's not my issue. It's all of our issues. And so that's something that I've learned by being a participant. And I wish I could speak more on it, but I'm coming to it new today. So thank you.
Well, I just want to add that the best advice always is to make sure that the money is out of politics. This is probably the best that you learn from a bad example that we experience, because this is what money in politics results in. And the second, probably also out all the economic interest and private companies from the public media, from media that is supposed to be independent and objective. This is the second thing. And then we have another question and still 5 minutes to respond. Bella is asking, considering that the Healthy Youth Act is one of California's most important educational guideline on sexual education, is there any risk in this being attacked under the current political climate moving to the right and to populism? I would say, Chanel?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. I think that in California, our elected government, I mean, as it stands now, has been very clear about kind of where they stand on ensuring the rights of not only women but also, you know, children to some extent. But I do think that nationally, we are seeing that throughout several different states, they are attacking sexual education, they are attacking books, education of all sorts, and kind of using the falling of Roe and where we are nationally to be able to really roll back a lot of our education standards and what it is that not only in school libraries, but also in public libraries, we are really kind of moving to a much more authoritarianism, that's the right word, approach to things. And so I think like what Rebecca said is really the answer, at least here in the United States, that you have to be very, very vigilant about who it is that we are electing. And not only in our national elections, but in our local elections. Who is on your neighborhood councils? Who's the superintendent? Who's on your school boards? Because that is really how we protect our education as far as our youth and kind of our day-to-day lives. But also local levels are really the things that affect us the most, I think, in our lives, right? We think about like national politics, and of course, we all should be involved, and you should be educated, and we should show up and we should vote, but not just every 4 years when there's a presidential election, right? Our local government really does have the power to be able to support or not support these things that are very important to us. And so that would be, I don't think that California's Healthy Youth Act is necessarily at risk, but that could change tomorrow with different elected officials, right? And so we have to continue to be vigilant and to recognize that that's just one state, right, out of 50. And there are several others where these things are very much attacked in a very real way.
And we have to add that any appeal to the United States Supreme Court can change our legislation. That is why constitutional amendments are always recommended, and being part of the constitutional regulation is always recommended. And I want to join Chanel in saying we have to work every day and think deep, not on the surface. I want to join also Ashley. We always have to remember that our rights are not exhausted with right to abortion. Right to abortion is a very small segment, very important, of a holistic circle of rights that complement each other. And even if we have a right to abortion, this will not help us to be successful mothers and successful professionals and educate ourselves successfully. So we have to really have this taste to global thinking, to thinking in depth, and have a good sense of all the segments of our rights that we need to achieve. I had one question, and maybe Bert can respond to that. I'm noticing as somebody that is also raised in a different environment, including professionally, I'm noticing that there isn't a national women organization in the United States. There isn't just an organization that puts all women, different in many ways, politically or by profession or otherwise. There isn't all American women organization like in India, all India women organization, or in many other countries. Can you give us an example, maybe with your home country, or just how it works in Europe?
Yeah, it is different. We have different organizations. You have the same thing. You have the caucus groups that are in joining America, Canada, and Europe together, who are the regions of the UNECC. Then you have also the NGO CSW New York, what is for the parallel event. I think if they get more members, you can speak there and you can make a group together who will say we have to fight for this. It is important to be member of these groups because then your most important points will come on the agenda. And the more you speak with other like-minded groups, you can form a big group. And the bigger you are, the more voices you have. We do the same in Europe. We have also the NGO CSW in Geneva, but we have also we have a caucus group, and we have also a lot of organizations who come together. Sonta and Sir Optimist are working close hand in hand for a lot of things, also for education, for knowing our rights and going up to the local politicians. As I would say, go to your community, and organize or reorganize yourself, put the issues who are key for you together, make a statement, bring it up to one of your local politicians, and then go up further and push, don't be quiet. Make statements, public statements, try to go into the schools and try to in the health centers. I know that in America it's much more difficult than it is in Europe because you don't have you're not backed up by international law, because the US will never sign international conventions because they don't want to control issue what's there. Dus I think take it from yourself, and I say, yeah, if you can organize yourself with more organization, the better. More voices, the stronger you are. Thank you.
Thank you all for attending this event. And we look forward to seeing you in some of the next events and hopefully in our event tomorrow.